Chapter 41 The Storm Before the Real Storm, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Kai and Mia returned back to the sect and a few days passed by, much to Kai's delight, without any drama. The group of 7 girls, Yui and Kiana, returned to Kai's house for another cultivation session. He had helped all of them reach the Hell Spirit realm as his demands had gone up. Now he required the people he cultivated with to be at the Hell Spirit realm or above. After his cultivation sessions, he cleaned the house and left. Kai wanted to cultivate with Mia, but her mental condition was still a little unstable. It would take her an entire month to recover it, and Kai had to wait till then. It was quite ironic, when you are an immortal, years, decades, or even centuries pass by in the blink of an eye. But when you live life like a mortal, feeling every single second ticking by, a month is quite a long time. But that wasn't all that happened. A week after Mia and Kai demonstrated their skills, strong wind flew towards the sect, followed by small earthquakes and a few lightning strikes. Kai and Mia immediately dropped what they were doing and rushed towards the sect's entrance, eyes fully alert. He looked at Mia and saw his own expression reflected on her face. The wind and these phenomena were not natural. They were signs of elemental spirits warning them about what was coming, and that coming was not a good thing. "What's the phrase, the storm before the real storm?" he asked, looking at Mia, who face-palmed. "It's the calm before the storm," she said, shaking her face in dismay. "If Izzy heard you, she would have killed you. You spent who knows how long time with her and still couldn't learn a quote," she added. Isabella was the most famous writer in the upper realms. She wrote various recipes for alchemy pills, stories of her own, information about powerful objects and illustrations of them, and many more. Almost every important book in the upper realms was written by her, and she was Kai's lover. He wondered about what Mia said and decided that what she was saying was the truth. Isabella would really kill him if she heard him say what he said. Let's forget about that. I think that whatever Junjun and his buddies were planning, is about to implement it. Maybe we should have really kidnapped him instead of joking about it," he said, his eyes completely serious. "Raiden. Gale. Serafina. Misty. Jade." He called out his spirits' names, and one by one, each spirit appeared in front of him. Mia stared at them before hugging Sarah. She knew all of them, and Sarah was her favorite spirit. She then hugged the other 4 before retreating back with a serious expression. "Raiden, go check our surroundings," Kai said in a deadly voice. Raiden was the spirit of the Western continent, or in other words, the white tiger spirit of this world was the ruler of the Western continent, but who cares about details? Raiden disappeared and appeared back instantly. "I scouted an army moving towards the sect. They have a 9th stage Hell Spirit Realm cultivator amongst them, and all of them are wearing red robes with a symbol of a red flower on them. Junjun is also with them." Raiden told them about everything he saw. A red flower and red color robes. "It's the Red Flower sect," Kai suddenly said with certainty. The Red Flower sect was famous for its alchemy skills, and the red flower, as the name suggests, was their symbol. "But why would they attack us?" Mia asked. She already believed what Kai said, but she didn't understand why they wanted to attack another sect, especially one of the 4 great sects like the Blue Moon sect. The clash between 2 great sects would not go unsupervised, as the Xian family would take action. You should have dug around the sect's history. The Blue Moon sect became a great sect because the previous ruler of the Eastern continent, Xian Watanabe, had actually wanted to grant the Blue Moon sect the right to become a dial cultivation sect again. But that wasn't possible, so she instead granted them an oath that still made sure that the Blue Moon sect remained a great sect. But her oath didn't extend towards protection, but still, even though the other 3 sects didn't like this sect, they still put up with it. But with Junjun mixing in with them, they are going to burn this sect to the ground. Kai explained. "What are you going to do?" Mia asked the question that was bothering her the most. She knew that if Kai wanted, he could destroy the entire planet with a single slash. But he was not some dispenser of justice or an evil mastermind. He did things that he wanted, regardless of whether it was evil or not. I will let them attack this sect. They will ask the disciples here to either join them, leave the sect, or be slaughtered. In that way, I could easily remove the sect disciples and elders who are not loyal. And I am sure that Junjun has some elders with him and they will show themselves once the attack begins. Kai said and walked back inside, leaving the beasts and Mia to stare at each other. All of them wondering whether what Kai said was true or not. In reality, he had become a little fond of the Blue Moon sect, or in other words, fond of girls like the kind light brown-haired Nezuko, the green-haired spark of mischief Yui, the piercing black-eyed Kiana, and even the sect master, Riang, with her cold blue eyes and ocean-colored hair. Maybe things will change, for the better or for the worse. When Junjun's voice echoed through the halls, calling out for everyone to get outside, Kai went with the flow and merged with the crowd. The moment had come. The attack would now begin and Kai will create a battlefield that will be written in history. A battlefield so bloody that flowers made from blood will bloom for decades. Chapter 42 The Forbidden Soul Controlling Pill, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The entire sect was standing outside, all of them bearing different expressions. Most of them grim, some neutral, some sorrowful, but the others had expressions of joy as if they knew that this was about to happen, and who knows? They might have known that this was about to happen. In front of them, about 200 people were standing in a close circle. The lowest level of cultivation Kai could see was at the 10th stage of the Sky Spirit Realm. The highest level of cultivation was, as Raiden had said, a dude with a mustache at the 9th stage of the Hell Spirit Realm. The odds were against the Blue Moon sect, or rather, the odds would have been against them if Kai and his company were not present there. Hear me, the disciples of Blue Moon sect, that cultivator, Kai, has many precious treasures with him. He is an orphan with a huge wealth and killing him would have no consequences. Junjun shouted and Kai narrowed his eyes. So what drove him to do this was greed for Kai's wealth. And in a way, it worked. All around him, disciples and elders started to whisper many things and they retreated back, leaving him standing alone. Mia came and joined him, his 5 spirits following her, invisible to everyone. Riang also came forward and looked at Junjun with something that Kai couldn't decipher. Junjun was wearing the sect robes of the Red Flower sect, a red flower etched near the heart area. You are going to kill him, why? Because he has a huge wealth. What happened to you, Junjun? You are no longer a human. Her words surprised Kai. He was thinking that she might sell him out, but instead, she was on his side. Junjun looked at her as if she didn't matter. He then looked at the crowd of disciples. All of you have 3 choices. Join us, fled, or stay with the sect. The first choice will guarantee you rewards, the second will provide you safety, however, the third choice will kill you as we will massacre every single member of this sect. He said in a persuasive voice and the crowd started to shift. The sect consisted of 6,013 disciples, 5,000 of them being outer court disciples, 1,000 of them being inner court disciples and the remaining 13 being core disciples, including Kai and Mia. The sect then had 30 elders, 15 males and 15 females, divided between the 3 courts. The highest position was of course the position of the sect's masters, currently, sect master as Junjun had left the sect. Out of them, about 3,500 disciples went to the other side, almost all of them bearing cruel smiles. The others didn't smile but still had joyful expressions. Only 2,513 disciples remained. One of the core disciples stepped forward and bowed to the sect master before looking at Junjun with malice. All of us are thankful for what you did, sect master Riang. But we value our lives and I am sorry to say this but we are leaving the sect. He bowed to her once again and walked away, 9 core disciples following him. After that, 2,000 disciples followed them, some quickly while others reluctantly dragged themselves away. Only a single core disciple, excluding Mia and Kai, remained. Surprisingly, she was Yui. This meant that Yui had been tricking Kai into believing that she was an inner court disciple. She looked at him, her face deprived of her usual mischief. Instead, replaced by a grim expression. Now the sect elders started moving, 10 of them moved towards Junjun's group, and shockingly Kiana was with them. Riang's face was full of horror when the disciples left, and Kiana leaving them was a shocking blow to her. "You too, Kiana," she softly said, her whole body was trembling. Junjun laughed at her expression and put a hand on her shoulder. "She had been our creature since the time she joined this sect," he said, and threw back his head as he started to laugh. Out of the remaining 20 elders, 15 of them gave a few last bows to Riang before leaving. Only 5 elders remained, one of them being the one who distributed robes. What was his name? Elder Min. So all the traitors and cowards have left the sect. Kai spoke for the first time and casually walked towards Junjun, who had his nose quivered in disgust. K.Kai, H.H.Lpm. Kiana began to say, but Junjun slapped her. A huge red mark appeared on her right cheek. Not a single word. He shouted and was about to hit her again when she disappeared. She was now standing beside Kai, his hands healing the mark on her chin. Her eyes were strange, focused, and unfocused at the same time. "The forbidden soul-controlling pill," he said in a soft, deadly voice. Junjun and the dude with a mustache flinched when they heard him. Mia and the spirits had expressions of disbelief on their faces. Whereas everyone else was confused about what Kai was talking about. Kai's face was calm, scary calm. He touched Kiana's forehead and put her to sleep. He teleported her back to her room before appearing back on the battlefield. "Where did you get that pill?" he said in a commanding voice, making Junjun and the mustache dude feel as though they should answer him. "Oh, and if we don't tell you, then what will happen?" the mustache dude said mockingly. Kai didn't say anything and just looked at Mia, who understood what he was saying. He wanted to obtain information and Mia would be the one to do it. Because if he did it himself, he would do something so brutal that nobody could ever forget about it. She started rising in the air and everyone gasped at her. Only cultivators at the heaven spirit realm could fly. Anyone else had to use a treasure if they wanted to fly. All of them were hoping that Mia was using a treasure, but she proved them wrong when she released her 3rd stage heaven spirit realm cultivation. "I will ask you once again, where did you get that pill?" Kai asked in the same deadly voice, and this time, the mustache dude answered his question. "A traitor sold it to us. He is moving from place to place and we don't know of his location. We don't even know his face. His entire face was hidden and we couldn't sense any spiritual energy from him either. He was using a treasure to hide it." He blurted out, and Junjun looked at him in disgust. But as soon as finished his last sentence, he looked at Kai in horror. "You were in fear and I used a skill that forces someone to tell the truth if they are feeling fear." Kai had the decency to explain what he did. "So what, you are not leaving this place alive? We have a huge advantage in our numbers, and even with a 3rd stage heaven spirit realm cultivator, we still outnumber you. And furthermore, we have many hell spirit realms cultivators with us, myself included." The guy recovered and said in an encouraging voice, letting his troops have a newfound hope. "You chose the wrong place to attack. All of you are doomed." Kai said, and took out the same sword he used against the dragons. The shiny black blade gleaming in the sunlight. However, a dark aura was surrounding it and a horrible ripple of power spread throughout the battlefield. The massacre would now begin. Chapter 43, The True Power of the Elements and the Wielder of Them, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The sword radiated an aura of extreme darkness. It started sucking the spiritual energy present around it. Mia frowned at the sword, a memory tugging at the back of her mind. I have seen that sword somewhere. Ah, why can't I remember it? She thought and looked at Kai's face. He was standing in a normal stance, his face deprived of any expression. Kai pointed the sword towards Junjun, who retreated back with an expression of horror on his face. Is that a peak-tier immortal grade weapon? The guy with the mustache asked in disbelief. His words made the others fear Kai even more. In case you forgot about this, the weapon grades are soul grade, imperial grade, divine grade, and immortal grade. Further divided into low tier, middle tier, high tier, and peak tier. But Kai simply threw back his head and laughed. He looked at them as if they had just told him the world's greatest joke. Peak-tier immortal grade. He echoed, looking at them with joyful eyes. This weapon cannot be graded. Its power cannot be compared, and only a few weapons like this are out there. And, even those are afraid of this. He said as he swung the sword in a deadly arc. Shockingly, the air around the sword parted as though the sword cut right through it. Everyone, except for Mia and his spirits, were staring at him. He then started rising, but this time, everyone believed that he was flying because of the sword he was holding. The wind started blowing as fast as a storm, dark clouds gathered in the sky, the earth started shaking, and it looked as though the world might end. Awe! Kai gave a mighty shout as his eyes turned golden. The cloud started rumbling as a golden thunderbolt struck his body. The thunder was swallowed by the sword and Kai's eyes turned back to purple. But they soon shifted to another color, this time, pure ice blue. The clouds rained at Kai, soon turning to hail. The sword swallowed the entire hailstorm and the clouds along with it. His eyes then turned earth brown as an earthquake shook the land below. A huge mass of land struck at the sword and was also swallowed by it. Next, his eyes turned gray as a huge storm started rising. But before it could turn into a massive tornado, Kai swung the sword at it and the tornado was sucked in by the sword. At last, Kai's eyes turned black, pure black. He extended his left hand and conjured a black ball of flame. He fed it to the sword and his entire body started glowing. His eyes, now back to purple, also started glowing. Is he a god? Riang asked Mia, as she believed that she had the answer to it. Everyone else also stared at Mia as they thought that she knew Kai. Their reason for doing this was because what Kai was doing was shaking their entire existence. Mia also gazed at him, floating alone in the sky. No matter how close he was to his harem, he always fought his battles alone. He never wanted to be a god, but fate led him into becoming the Harem Overlord, and fate led him literally, or in other words, the creator of fate led him. The true power of the elements and the wielder of them. She said in a clear voice as though that resolved everything. The spirits, after hearing her words, knelt down in respect. This was one of the many titles Kai had earned. The wielder of elements. Everyone could use elements, but Kai used them as though they were parts of his own body. He had kidnapped the rulers of elements, a story famous in the entire upper realm. However, no one knew why he did that or how he did it. After hearing Mia's words, Kai glanced below. He finally raised the sword in an arc and swung it. A white wave emerged from it, but before it could reach the ground, it turned into a huge storm. Cutting through skin as though it was paper, the tornado started the massacre, taking down 500 or so people with it, both enemies and the allies. Kai snapped his fingers as the loyal disciples of the Blue Moon sect came back to life. He could resurrect anyone here for an infinite number of times. This meant that he could wreak as much destruction as he wanted and he would face no consequences. He is the Purple Shinigami. Run for your life. Someone shouted Kai's newly earned title and the enemies started to run. But where could they run? Everywhere they went was an element, let it be the land below their feet or the water in rivers or the air they used for breathing. Kai swung his sword once again and a brown wave of energy detached from the sword. It sunk deep into the ground and the land started to tremor. The land shook beyond your imagination and cracks started to appear. Kai created a formation around the enemies and the earthquake stayed inside it. The land cracked and lava started to appear from inside the planet. People were screaming, trying to stay alive by pushing each other or trying to secure a safe place. If this earthquake happened on Earth, then it could be recorded as a scale 10 mega quake. The entire piece of land on which the enemies were standing, shattered. They fell down in a huge hole as lava started burning their bodies. Their screams died down after a while and complete silence was followed after it. Complete silence till Kai restored the land and the people standing on it. Everyone was back and started to bawl, wondering why they decided to attack such an entity like Kai. Mercy. Please show mercy, oh the great god of death. The guy with the mustache fell on his knees and started pleading, tears falling from his eyes. Everyone else followed him, Junjun along with them. Kai watched them, his face full of disgust. Mercy. There's no such thing as mercy. I don't think you would have shown mercy if I was just a normal orphan with a lot of wealth. You would have killed me and taken my wealth. Since every single male, except Elder Min, left the sect, you would have definitely *D the women and took those who wanted to live as slaves. He said in a cruel voice, his face full of flaming anger. I am no god. There is no god, and if there is someone who created this, then they don't care about anything. If you are my ally, I am your most desired wish come true. If you are my enemy, I am your worst nightmare. He said in a cold voice and swung his sword twice. 2 waves of ice blue and golden were released as they turned into a huge tsunami and lightning wickedly moved at an unpredictable speed. The cultivators started to drown as their lungs filled with water. The others started to die by electrocution as the lightning burned them while they were wet. Their bodies burned to the core and they died screaming. But that was not the end, one final attack was left. After the tsunami died down and the lightning subsided, Kai resurrected them once again and looked towards the north. This will happen if you anger me. My wrath is not something you can withstand, Ancestor Zien Watanabe. Kai said to Ancestor Watanabe, who had come here after sensing the terrible aura. She gasped at him as his face was what she had been thinking about for some time. She had witnessed the entire thing unfold and was horrified. However, she didn't do anything, or rather, she couldn't do anything as her body was overcome by fear. She herself had appointed the Blue Moon sect as a great sect. She was a pervert in her younger days and loved to cause mischief. Because of her powers, she had ascended as the ruler of the Western continent. She looked at Kai and wondered what would happen if he swung the sword towards her. Her eyes were full of fear and she couldn't speak anything. She remained suspended in the air and looked at the people below. The Blue Moon sect, or what was left of it, had expressions of justice on their faces. Even though some of them were disgusted by what happened, but when they heard Kai say that the males on the other side would *PE them, they nodded their heads as they thought Kai did the right thing. On the other side, Junjun and the dude with the mustache bore expressions of dread. The first 4 waves had caused enough mayhem and pain. What would the last attack be? They had seen the black ball of flame and knew that it would be more painful than the others. The only thing they knew was that it would be over after it. Kai looked at them with pity, even though he was the one who was doing everything. The soul black flames will burn you into nothing and it will burn the foundations of your soul. Nothing could be worse than it. He said in a cruel voice before swinging the sword for the last time. Chapter 44 The Collector of Souls, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. BNOL.M. Instead of a huge black wave, a black ball the size of a watermelon was released from the sword. Kai calmly put the sword back in the pendant as he watched the black ball falling towards the members of the Red Flower sect and the traitors of the Blue Moon sect. The bomb looked as though a meteor was falling from the sky. The ball burst open and started to rain, but as soon as the drop of flame came in contact with the people, screams started to rise. The black flame started to cling to their bodies, burning away their skin, bone, and everything it touched. The flame started to spread throughout their bodies, but it didn't burn anything after that. But they were still screaming. The soul black flames. It didn't acquire this name because it was a cool name. The reason for this was that these flames burned your soul. Literally burned your soul. Whoever was touched by it, was seeing their worst fears, hidden deep inside their soul. Their darker side was coming out and killing them. Every time their soul took a major blow, a piece of their body burned off into nothing. It was agonizing to watch, and some disciples got nauseous and threw up. But Zien Watanabe was staring at Kai, her expression unreadable. She knew one thing, that if she ever offended Kai, she would have an end just like those guys standing below. Everyone burned down into nothingness. Everyone except Junjun and the guy with the mustache who had stopped burning after a few seconds. Their eyes were hollow and tears fell from their eyes. What do you want? We have given you everything we have. The rest is with the sect master who is at the sect. The mustache dude said in a horrid voice, his throat contracting as he spoke. Where can I find that traitor who gave you that pill? Kai simply asked, amusement on his face. He didn't feel good by inflicting pain on others, but seeing their expressions, which were proud a few minutes ago, now completely horrid and pathetic. Kai couldn't help but feel a little amusement in this. He is said to be on the most eastest spot of the continent. That's all we know, please kill us. This time, Kai inclined as he snapped his fingers, and both Junjun and the guy with the mustache turned to ash. He was about to go back inside when the ground started to shake. About a 9-scale earthquake, if you wanted to know. Kai. Mia asked, her tone full of confusion. I am not doing this, but I know the person who is doing this. Kai said softly as he gazed at the land. A dark energy spread throughout the surroundings, and the light from the sun dimmed, even though no clouds were present in the sky. Kai's spirits started to get out of control, and he had to send them back. A huge wave of darkness hit everyone, and a guy emerged from it. His hair completely black, eyes as dark as a black hole. 2 horns were coming out from both the sides of his head, their points glistening. His clothes were otherworldly, black pants and a formal black shirt with a blackish-brown formal coat. He was holding a huge wicked scythe, half silver like the moon and half crimson, like blood. You came here yourself? Kai said, his eyes glinting. The boy just shrugged and swung his scythe in the air. About 69 balls of white energy flew towards his scythe and entered it. These were the souls of the people that died instantly, and Kai didn't resurrect them. What the guy in front of him was holding was the first scythe to be created. The boy himself was someone that everyone wanted to avoid, but in the end, he got everyone, regardless of immortality. The collector of souls. Death. You personally came here to collect the souls. Kai said in a neutral voice, and everyone stared at the boy, Death as Kai called him. They didn't want to believe that someone as young as that boy could be Death, but they had no other explanation for him. And they didn't say anything because if it turned out to be true, they didn't want to face the consequences of it. You are alive. Well, just as I thought, the wish and curse still exist. The boy, Death, spoke in a cheerful tone, something you might not associate with Death. Speaking of which, you might have expected him to be wearing a huge cloak that covered his entire body, but honestly, Death was a modern type of person. He stepped forward and hugged Kai, shocking everyone, except for Kai, who hugged him back. Seeing that Mia is here, she is also alive, isn't she? Death asked as he looked at Kai, who nodded. How do you know my name? Mia asked. Death chuckled lightly before staring at her. Mia felt as though Death was peering at her soul. I see everything and nothing at the same time. I know all about you, and I will still know nothing about you. That's what I am. He answered. Mia started trembling after she heard Death's answer. I promised you that I will take care of her, and since you are death, I don't think I should break that promise. And I succeeded in getting your attention by letting exactly 69 souls free. Kai replied to Death's question after Mia had calmed down. Death nodded his head in approval and chuckled a little as he heard 69 souls. He then nodded his head as though he was satisfied with Kai's answer. Well, I will see everyone present here, sooner or later. Everything comes back to me, and as much as I don't want to, you will, too, return to me. Death said in a sad voice before disappearing, leaving behind everyone with gaping mouths. What was that? Watanabe asked, but suddenly, she went into a daze. Everyone else, except Mia, followed her, their eyes rolling back and their bodies as still as statues. He is the original Death, the collector of souls, the Reaper if you would like. I promised to take care of his sister, and well, what can I say? You don't break your promise if it's to death or otherwise, you don't want to know what will happen. Kai answered Mia's unasked question. I know that your harem is quite formidable, but still, you got Death's frigging sister as a member. She exclaimed loudly as though she has just found out that she was pregnant. I got people who are more formidable than her. Just stick with me and you will meet them. But for now, I have to cure Kiana and do another important thing. He said to her as he looked at the land in front of him. It was full of blood. Rivers of blood, and Kai was the one who created this. He picked a drop of it before starting to do what he wanted to. The others unfroze and stared at Kai, who snapped his fingers. Blood-red flowers started to bloom from the blood, their petals as crimson as anything you have ever seen. Let these flowers born from blood stay as a reminder for what will happen if you anger me. He said and disappeared. The last flower bloomed and a drop of blood fell from its petal. The blood, symbolizing wrath and new beginning. Chapter 45, Long Lost Heir of the Zien Family, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mia quickly rushed towards Kiana's house as Kai had forgotten to take her with him. As soon as Mia went away, Watanabe stepped closer to the blood flower and picked one up. It was entirely red and a drop of blood was there in the middle of it. The remaining disciples, elders, and sect master of the Blue Moon sect stared at the flower in Watanabe's hand. Their gaze then shifted towards the group of flowers spread throughout the area. The flowers emitted a fragrance that was similar to blood, however, a sweet fragrance. They all thought at the same time. What would have happened if Kai was not here? They didn't want to imagine such a thing, so they removed the thought from their mind and sat on the ground. On Kai's end, he was about to treat Kiana when Mia suddenly burst in through the door. She was panting because she had run across the entire sect to reach here. I think you forgot something. She said sarcastically as she glanced at Kiana, who was peacefully sleeping on her bed. Well, good for you. You set a new record for running. Kai replied with a smile that quickly disappeared. Can you heal her? Mia asked, her voice full of doubt. The soul-controlling pill binds your soul with the soul of another person. You have to obey their command whether they tell you to die or kill. He said, not answering her question. But she was fighting back. Mia said as she remembered Kiana saying, help me, to Kai. The pill she ate was a low-grade pull. The fewer impurities the pill contains, the more powerful it is. But because it was a low-grade pill, Kiana's soul was able to defy the other soul tied to it. Kai explained. He then turned back to look at Kiana as his hand lit up with a white light. He touched her forehead with it and her eyes flew open. She stared at Kai, then Mia, and then the entire room before passing out. The soul tied to her soul is already dead. Only a few parts of that soul remained in her and it was quite easy to remove them. She will heal after some time. He said and left her house, Mia following him. The real question is, how did that traitor obtain this pill? Mia asked Kai as they were walking towards the sect's entrance. Only 5 people in the entire universe can create that pill. Two of them belong to the best alchemy sect in the entire universe and are also Rizia's former disciples. The third is Rizia herself, and the fourth person, the creator of this pill, is dead. The fifth person is of course me. He counted the people on his right hand. This means that Rizia is also on this planet. Mia said suddenly as she understood the meaning behind Kai's words. He nodded in approval. This means that we will have to find her. But the problem is, I cannot teleport us to another continent. I will have to break through to the second stage of Imperial Spirit Realm before I could do that. He said with a sigh as he and Mia teleported back to the sect's entrance. Nobody had moved from their spot. It looked as though they were waiting for Kai to come back, because as soon as they saw him, all of them stood up and bowed, except for Watanabe. Thank you for your help, Kai. I have an important question to ask that I will ask later. Come meet me at the sect master's pavilion. Riang said and departed, the disciples following her. Only Kai, Watanabe and Mia remained. Where did you obtain that treasure? Watanabe asked, and Mia raised her eyebrows at Kai. He had to freeze Watanabe so that he could tell the entire story to Mia. I altered their memories so they saw that I sacrificed a treasure to summon an 8th stage heaven spirit realm beast. The traitors died instantly, and I told everyone that I have many more treasures. They don't remember about you having a 1st stage heaven spirit realm cultivation, or about them dying and being resurrected again, or practically everything that happened. Kai explained. As you already know Kai's motto. Remove memories if you don't want drama, he had to do that. He unfroze Watanabe and answered her question. You don't want to know that? He said in a dangerous tone, and Watanabe decided to change the subject. I am going to stay at this sect for some time. Just to make sure that the Red Flower sect doesn't launch further attacks. She said and moved towards the sect. Mia and Kai raised eyebrows at each other, both confused about Watanabe's actions. In reality, Watanabe didn't care about further attacks as Kai would take care of them. The power of the Red Flower sect was halved anyways. In reality, she wanted to stay with Kai, and you know the rest. Did you just seduce that woman in 2 tries? Mia asked when she was sure that Watanabe was out of hearing limit. Well, what can I say? Women like me and I like them. Kai said with a shrug and moved towards the right as Mia tried to hit him in the shoulder. Jokes aside, how the hell did you seduce Death's sister? Mia asked the question that was chewing up her mind. I didn't exactly seduce her. Honestly, I was seduced by her. Kai said and laughed. Mia was puzzled by his answer. What do you mean by that? When you will see her, you will also be seduced by her. She's even got a nickname for herself, the Seducer of Death. Even though her twin sister is completely different from her. Her twin's nickname is the Tsundra of Light. Kai said, and his eyes turned hazy as he remembered the past. But Mia was full of questions. She has a sister. Is she related to Death too? Is SH? Calm down. Death has a counterpart, in fact, many counterparts. The creators, if you would like. And like that, his sister also has a counterpart. It's quite simple. He said. Ah, whatever. But the real thing is, how did you conquer her? Mia asked. I had to fight Death, which I might say, was not a pleasant experience. His damn scythe kept summoning the power of souls, and he was so powerful. But still, the battle ended in a stalemate, and Death asked me to take care of his sister. Mia couldn't believe her ears. Kai had fought Death and the match had ended in a tie. That was unbelievable. But his sister died and he didn't look angry when he saw you. Mia said as she remembered that Death hugged Kai. He already knew that she didn't die, as he knows how everyone really dies. He has a book for every person alive in this universe, and that person's book records how they die. But the thing is, no one can read the book. It only opens 5 minutes before a person dies. So because of that, he knew that she or you or the others were not dead. He explained as Mia's eyes grew wide when she heard that everyone has a death book. Well, I will see you later. Gotta go and talk to Riang and Watanabe, and I also have to check Kiana's condition. Kai bid his farewell as he disappeared. Somehow, Mia got the feeling that the talk Kai was about to have would be something more than a talk. Well, what could she do? Kai stayed true to his words and went to Kiana's house to check up on her condition. Surprisingly, she was awake and was clutching her eyes. What are you doing? Kai asked as he softly reached her. Kiana jumped when she heard Kai's voice and hugged his chest to her face. She then let go of him and raised her face to meet his eyes. That's when Kai saw her split pupils. Yellow-eyed split pupils, just like Watanabe's, even though hers were dark yellow whereas Kiana's were more like lightning yellow. You are a part of the Xian family and you have a strong lightning element. He said suddenly, looking straight into her eyes. Kiana had to break his gaze because it was too intense. I did so many things I didn't want to. She said slowly, and Kai understood the meaning behind her words. She had been under the Red Flower sect's control from the time she joined the sect. They would have used her as a spy. As for her eyes, the soul-controlling pill trades one of the person's appearances with the one under the pill's effect. Now that Kai remembered, the man with the mustache did have brown eyes. Don't worry, that was not you. You were being controlled by the pill and you managed to fight it quite perfectly. Good job. Kai said in an encouraging voice and patted her back. Then who am I? Kiana asked in a hollow voice. Now that's either a spiritual question as in, what am I doing in this world, or, for what purpose was I born for, or you are asking about your life before the soul-controlling pill bound your soul. He said in a joking voice, and Kiana gave him a little smile. Well, lucky for you, we have the ancestor of the Xian family staying at this sect. Let's go and see her as she might know you. He offered her his hand as she grasped it, squeezing it tightly. Chapter 46 The New Sect Master of the Blue Moon Sect, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Xian Watanabe was eyeing her room carefully before Kai suddenly popped up in front of her. Now, she had been startled before, but when someone pops into your room without any warning, you scream. And that's what Watanabe did, plus she released some of her aura with the scream. Now, if Kai hadn't neutralized her aura, the entire sect might have perished on top of them. If you want to scream, then at least keep your power in check. Kai said as he laughed at her expression. Watanabe's cheeks turned red from embarrassment and she glared at Kai, trying to conjure up some hatred. But it was impossible to hate Kai unless he stole your woman or something, so she gave up on that. She straightened her back as she saw that there was another person with him. If she remembered correctly, the name of this person was Kiana, and according to Kai, she had been under the influence of something known as the soul-controlling pill. Kiana had her head bowed, not because of respect, but because she didn't want Watanabe to see her eyes. Sorry you had to see something like that. She elegantly said to Kiana. And next time, give me a warning before suddenly popping up in front of me. She added as she glared at Kai, who sheepishly laughed at her. Yeah. I am not here to talk with you. She is. He said as he pushed Kiana forward, forcing her to lift her face. Watanabe gasped in shock as she saw Kiana's split pupils. She stepped back, her mouth agape as she continued to stare at Kiana. You. It looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't form the words. Kai stepped forward and touched her shoulders. A shock ran through her body and she was suddenly calm. She looked at Kai in surprise before turning towards Kiana. You were smuggled out of the palace after your birth. Your mother, my son's wife, was found dead and everyone there at your birth was dead. My son, Xian Asahi, ravaged the entire continent to find you, but I guess since you didn't have any royal traits in you, we couldn't find you. Watanabe said sadly as she touched Kiana's cheek. Whereas Kai was standing at a distance, thinking whether he was trapped in an episode of The Reunion of Long-Lost Granddaughter and Her Grandmother, because it definitely felt like he was stuck in it. A low-grade soul-controlling pill takes about 15 years before you can bind your soul to the person. You are saying you couldn't find her for 15 years? He said in a soft voice, staring directly at Watanabe, who appeared shocked. But we searched every inch of the continent, we even ordered the 4 great families and the 4 great sects to help us. She insisted. Oh great. I am pretty sure that those families will definitely try to meddle with my life. Well, one problem at a time. Kai inwardly thought. She was smuggled to the southern continent. He said in a definite voice and proceeded to tell Watanabe about the people from the southern continent who met him when he first appeared on this planet. How are they doing this? Even if they can fly, the sea contains thousands of beasts, ranging from the Hell Spirit Realm to the Imperial Spirit Realm. Do they have some kind of a treasure? Watanabe said as she looked towards Kai for help. Could they have formed a teleportation formation? No, that will take an expert at least at the Divine Spirit Realm. What could they have done? Wait, it couldn't be. He suddenly pounded his fist on the palm of his other hand as he finally understood what they could have done. They formed a space gate. Kai said in a definite voice, confusing both Watanabe and Kiana. It's a treasure that connects 2 places. But the thing is, a space gate has to be created at the same time, meaning that a space gate must be created at both the places at the same time or otherwise it won't work. He explained as his mind started considering other possibilities. But how did they construct a space gate on this planet? Only cultivators that have the space element can create those, and I am pretty sure that this planet doesn't have those. Did someone from my harem create those? No 2 people have to create them at the same time. The only possibility is that someone from the upper realms created it. He thought. I will investigate it personally. You can inform your son about this. Kai said out loud to Watanabe. She looked like she wanted to argue, but in the end, she just nodded. I am gonna talk to Kiana for a while. You can go back to your own business. She said as she made the shoe gesture at Kai. He teleported back to his house with a frown. Women. I just restored her granddaughter's soul and she shooed me away. TCH, a thank you would have been nice. He said bitterly before stretching his body. He still had an appointment with Riang, so he decided to walk to the sect master's pavilion. The pavilion had many rooms, one of them occupied by the Xian family ancestor. Riang lived in the room on the end of the floor. This time, Kai knocked on her door and let her open it. Riang saw that Kai was standing outside her door. She let him in, her heart beating at a very fast pace. Now, this was expected as Kai's presence always managed to make the hearts of women flutter with excitement. Well, sometimes, even men were entrapped by Kai's presence, and that was something he didn't want. Well, let's have a nice family-friendly chat. Kai said as he smiled, fully aware that this chat would be anything but family-friendly. I want you to become the sect master of the Blue Moon sect. Riang said quickly, afraid that Kai will not listen to her. And why is that? He asked as he raised his eyebrows. Because you are strong enough to protect this sect. But more than that, you are strong enough to help this sect get back to its former glory as a dual cultivation sect. Riang explained as Kai smiled. He had only met a few people who loved dual cultivation as much as he did. What Riang said was true, that he could easily do it. But before that, he wanted to know what Riang thought of dual cultivation. What do you think about it? He asked in a curious tone. I am an orphan, or rather I was made an orphan by some assassins who murdered my parents. My parents were huge merchants with a lot of money, and one of their trusted advisors betrayed them by sending assassins after them. They managed to kill my parents, but not before they had hidden me in a forest. I was there for 3 whole days, starving and near death-like state. But before I could die, the previous sect master found me and took me in. He fed me and took care of me, and when I reached 16 years of age, he gave me a choice to either stay at the sect or leave it for another sect. I stayed, and when he died, I took over this sect. This is a home for me, a home that can never be replaced. Riang told her story to Kai and stared at his eyes. She has only told this story to 4 people, Junjun, Kiana, Elder Min, and now, Kai. The previous 3 had pitied her, but Kai's face was wiped clean of any expression. Did you get your revenge on that person who murdered your family after you became the sect master? He asked in a neutral voice. No, I did not choose the path of revenge. I have devoted my life to dual cultivation, and that is why I ask you to help me protect it. She said and bowed to Kai. His face lit up with a smile, and he put his hand on Riang's chin and kissed her. Taken by surprise, her mouth opened under Kai's lips, letting his tongue enter her mouth. She gave out a low moan as Kai wrestled with her tongue. When he broke the kiss, a trail of salice was left behind. In my entire life, which is a really long life, I have only met a handful of people who truly understand what dual cultivation is, and you are one of them. I will accept the position as the sect master of Blue Moon Sect. Kai said with a smile, and Riang returned his smile with her own smile. Well, your first task as sect master is to cultivate with the female sect master, meaning me. She said with a quick grin, even though her heart was beating at a rapid pace. Well, you are certainly demanding, and honestly, I do like demanding women. Kai gave her an evil grin before picking her up in princess style. He then dropped her down on the bed in her room and starting removing her robes. Chapter 47. Will you stop peeping at us? Our point 18, chapter preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Riang was lying on her bed in her underwear, whereas Kai was admiring her body while standing above her. Riang's pale skin was flawless, and she had maintained a good figure. Kai slowly ran his hands on her stomach that bore many scars. While I was hidden in the forest, a beast attacked me. The previous sect master rescued me and nursed me back to health, even though he was not able to remove these scars. Riang said in a soft voice. Only a few people had seen her scars, including Junjun. All of them had flinched at the sights of the scars, and some had looked at her in disgust. Most men liked their women to be flawless. Many thought that a woman bearing scars was ugly. So, Riang was nervous about what Kai was thinking, as his handsome face was deprived of any expression. You are thinking about what I will think about your scars? Kai said in an amused tone. Riang's face turned red from embarrassment, and she slowly nodded. He put both of his hands on her waist and gazed into her eyes. Most men think that scars make a woman ugly, but do you know what I think? He looked at Riang, who shook her head. I think that scars make a woman more beautiful. They tell the story of your hardship and serve as a reminder that you are as strong as anyone out there. So, if you ever get any scars, be proud of them. Kai said slowly. Riang looked as though she received enlightenment and nodded enthusiastically. Do you want me to heal them? He asked after a short while, and Riang starting thinking. If you can heal them, then heal all of them, except for one. It will serve as a reminder. She said with a smile as Kai's hands started glowing. Ah, Riang moaned lightly as Kai's hands moved over her stomach. The skin below his hand started to mend on itself, and after a few minutes, every single scar except for one disappeared. Thank you, Kai. Riang said in an odd voice before she pulled him in for a kiss. His body slid over her as their mouths joined together. Their tongues started to meddle with each other as Riang felt a tingling sensation in her bottom lips. Kai's rod started to harden as Riang felt it through his clothes. He shucked off his clothes as his rod burst forth with all its glory, pointing towards the heavens. It's bigger than I imagined. Riang said loudly and gasped. She was mesmerized by its appearance, as it was much bigger than any of her previous partners' penises. It looked like a divine thing in front of her, and she touched it to make sure it was real. She then sat up and slowly took the tip of it inside her mouth. She then used her tongue to lick it from the bottom to the tip, sending waves of electric shock inside Kai's body. She then slowly started swallowing it and had the entire rod inside her mouth in no time flat. She started massaging it with her warm tongue and Kai enjoyed it very much. Even though he enjoyed his cultivation sessions with other women, all of them were still amateurs, not counting the real Mia as he had yet not cultivated with her. But Riang was an expert at dual cultivation. No wonder she became the sect master. Junjun had been living the time of his life but he had to go ahead and dump it for his greed. I am about to come. Kai warned Riang as she started increasing her speed. In reality, Kai could last for millenniums but he wanted to cultivate with Riang. So he decided to release his yang qi. His body tensed as his dick released a large amount of yang qi inside Riang's mouth. She was surprised by the amount of yang qi and tried to swallow all of it. But she was unable to do so and white liquid started to drip out of the corners of her mouth. It was quite sweet. She said after she had swallowed all of it. She licked the yang qi at the corners of her mouth with her tongue. It was quite seductive if you looked at it. My turn to please you. Kai said with a grin as he put his hands on top of her bra-covered breasts. He could feel her aroused nipples below her bra. He removed her bra with a quick stroke of his hand and now her breasts were bare. Kai started groping them as Riang tried to control her moaning. He teasingly pinched her nipples and she released a loud moan. Unknown to them, somebody had clearly heard them. The room didn't contain a soundproof barrier and Riang's moans echoed in the entire hallway, meaning that Watanabe could hear them. At first, she didn't understand why she heard those sounds but then she remembered that she was staying at a dual cultivation sect. She decided to go and tell the person making these noises to lower their voice or at least use a soundproof barrier. But as soon as she reached the door at the end of the hallway, she saw that it was open by a crack. She took a peek inside and her heart started racing. She saw Kai standing naked and Riang below him, her body was also naked. Her little sister started tingling and her past memories resurfaced. She was a pervert in her early days and had many one-time flings in the past. That was until she met her husband and fell in love with him. But after having Jean, he was killed by assassins seeking the throne of the Western continent and she was left as a widow. Watanabe could have married someone else but for some reason, she didn't. She also didn't have sex with anyone after that. But now, seeing Kai, she wanted to be the one in his embrace. Her hand started traveling down to her sweet spot and she tried to control it but it was impossible. But before she could reach it, a voice spoke in her head. Will you stop peeping at us? Kai had sent a spiritual message to her as he had felt her presence. Watanabe was startled to hear his voice but when she recovered, her face started burning with embarrassment. I will not stop you from watching but next time, tell me if you want to watch something like this. Or perhaps, do you want to do this? Kai asked in an amused tone and Watanabe's face turned redder than ever. I will go back. She said quickly before running back to her room. I will come see you later. Kai said before Watanabe left and her heart started beating faster at the thought of him coming in her room and both of them being there alone. Her mind started conjuring up perverted thoughts, and no matter how hard she tried to stop them, the thoughts kept escalating. Her body moved against her will and she removed her clothes. She gave up as she knew that she was full of sexual frustration accumulated over a large period. She was completely naked and slowly moved towards the mirror. As she gazed at her reflection, she saw that her body was still quite seducing. Her left hand slowly started kneading her breasts and her right hand reached her pussy. She started rubbing it and moaned lightly, making sure that nobody could hear her. She masturbated for some time before pulling back her clothes. She decided to roam the sect till Kai completed his session. Well, who could have guessed that she would masturbate? He chuckled lightly as he heard Watanabe's moan. Even though no one else would have been able to hear it with Riang's moaning and all, Kai was still sensitive to moaning. And the shocking thing was that he had talked with Watanabe while kneading Riang's breasts, which, as he might say, was a big achievement. Who says that Kai is not a multi-talented person? He gave on massaging and starting using his mouth on her breasts. He sucked on the nipples alternatively and used his tongue to lick around them in a perfect circle. He then pinched them together and sucked on both of them at the same time. Riang released a moan that could be heard in the heavens. Ah! I am coming! She screamed as her body twitched and she ejaculated a large amount of yin qi out of her hole. And like any gentleman, okay, perhaps not a gentleman, but still, Kai stood back and watched her body twitch because of her orgasm. After she completed her orgasm, Kai took a hold of his penis from the base before touching the tip to the entrance of her cave. Because Riang's body was still quite sensitive, she released a moan. The real fun will now begin," Kai said as he looked into her eyes with a grin. Chapter 48 I will let you experience an advanced technique, R.18, Chapter Preview, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Kai started pushing his rod deeper inside Riang. She could feel every inch of Kai's rod as it moved further inside. When it was fully inside her, Kai's penis started to mold itself according to Riang's caves. As soon as the process finished, Riang felt a sudden wave of pleasure surge through her body. Kai grabbed her breasts with his hands and started kneading them. He then started moving his hips and started thrusting his rod into Riang's cave. The bed suddenly felt like a small space for Riang as it started to shudder with their moments. Clapping sounds echoed through the entire hallway as their bodies slid together. Kai went in for a kiss while still pounding her and fiercely wrestled with her tongue. Riang was like a prey trapped by a snake as her entire body was being controlled by Kai. Her mouth was invaded by his slippery tongue, her breasts were being kneaded by his hands and his rod was thrusting into her sacred spot. She intertwined her arms behind Kai's neck as he increased his speed. His left hand let go of her breasts while his right hand continued to massage them. He broke the kiss and looked at Riang's face with a grin. "You are going to experience an otherworldly feeling," he said as his right hand grabbed hold of her ass. He held onto it tightly and started pounding her in a new position. His left hand on her breasts and his right one groping her ass while he pounded her. Yin continued to flow out of her pussy as Kai continued to move. He used her ass to speed up his thrusting and his rod started to hit the top of her cave with a sudden newfound force. Her inner walls clung to his rod as he moved expertly, squeezing it with immense pressure as though they wanted to become one with it. Riang moaned loudly as her cave grew extremely hot and her body released a large amount of yin qi. At the same time, Kai released his own yang qi inside and filled her up. His rod was completely soaked in yin qi as he took it out of her cave. A mixture of two different juices flowed out of her pussy, completely in harmony with each other, and formed a puddle on the sheets. That was quite intense, Riang said while panting. She was taking deep breaths as Kai had ravaged her like a beast. Her body was completely exhausted, but when she saw the richness of Kai's yang qi, she knew that she would be able to last for a few more sessions. "Out of everyone I cultivated with, you have the most resistance. Cultivate the yang qi and I will let you experience an advanced technique," he said before sitting in a lotus position. He started cultivating the yin qi while his rod was still hard and pointing towards the sky. Riang was confused by this method of cultivation, but she still sat in a lotus position to cultivate the yang qi inside her. 1 hour later, Riang had surprisingly, for her, and unsurprisingly, for the readers, broken through to the 9th stage of the Hell Spirit realm. She glanced at Kai and wondered if she would have a breakthrough to the Heaven Spirit realm as his yang qi was extremely rich in purity and energy. He opened his eyes a few minutes later and stared at Riang, who was staring at him. He didn't say anything and laid down on the bed. "Come on top of me," he ordered Riang, who obeyingly moved above his body. Her ass and tits were hanging in front of Kai's face, calling him to devour them. He gestured for her to lower herself and she slowly sat on his dick, its tip ravaging through her insides and finally settling down after it touched the tip of her cave. Riang didn't wait for Kai's orders and started moving. Up and down, up and down. Her huge breasts moved along with her, moving up and down with her. Every time she swallowed Kai's entire rod and her ass touched the base of it, a huge impact rushed through both of their bodies. She started riding it wildly, her tits flaying in the air with the massive friction caused by her moving. Kai's hand shot forward and pinched her clit, thus making her moan with ferocity. She shot load after load of yin chi out of her hole and finally settled after her orgasm. "Well, I am sure you had your fun, but it's time to experience the real technique," he said in an amused voice before grabbing hold of her waist. Suddenly, Riang felt Kai's dick expand inside her and it started lifting her. It expanded by half an inch and Riang was now hovering above it. Kai then shrunk it and Riang's body fell on top of Kai's with a thump. Ah, she moaned loudly as this was more pleasurable than all of her sessions combined. Kai once again expanded it and then shrunk it, increasing the pace with it. At first, Riang's body was hitting Kai's body with a thump, but as its speed increased, their bodies started making loud clapping noises as flesh hit against flesh with immense force. While doing that, Kai started pinching her nipples, thus increasing her pleasure. He then suddenly stopped and pulled Riang towards him so that her face was in front of his face while his rod was still inside her. He then once again started increasing and shrinking it and felt her body against his. Her breasts, tightly pressed against his chest, rubbed on Kai's body. He felt the nipples brush against his muscular chest and both of them enjoyed it. "Finale time," he suddenly said and grabbed hold of her ass with both of his hands. He then pushed her down on his rod while still expanding it. She felt as though her cave might burst but it didn't and she felt a huge warm feeling inside her. Yin Chi started to leak out of her cave uncontrollably and Kai's rod was bathing in it. When he felt that Riang had reached her limit, he released his Yang Chi inside her, once again, filling her up to the brim. Riang didn't remove herself from Kai's body, or rather, she couldn't remove herself. All her strength had deserted her and she lay on his body lifelessly. Kai removed his rod from her hole and let her rest on top of him, both of them cultivated in such a manner. Riang managed to make another breakthrough to the 8th stage of the Hell Spirit realm. As for Kai, he stood up with a smile and wore his clothes. He then helped Riang wear her clothes and both of them stood up. It's a wonder. With just a single session, I managed to advance by 5 stages. Does that happen to everyone that cultivates with you? She asked in a puzzled manner and her face quivered into confusion, startling a laugh out of Kai. First tell me about the number of disciples left in the sect, he suddenly said with a serious expression. If I round them up, about 500 disciples are currently present in the sect. 300 of them being outer court disciples. You, Yui, and Mia being core disciples and the rest of them being inner court disciples. She said. That many people stayed here, he said in a surprised voice. Forget about the outer court or even core disciples. That many inner court disciples decided to stay at the sect. It was a wonder. All of them are girls I rescued, many having the same fate as me. They decided to stay with me till the end, even if it meant dying. Which of course didn't happen as you prevented it. She replied in a thankful sort of voice. I will have a talk with you on that later and I have to show you something. However, I will first go and have a talk with Watanabe, he said and was about to move away when Riang stopped him. Take this, it's the sect master's robe, she said and handed Kai a royal dark blue robe with a golden belt to tie it. Let's wear that in a new style, he said in a mischievous tone and took the robe from her. The cloth started to morph and became an elegant cloak bearing Kai's harem symbol on both the shoulders. The symbol of the Blue Moon sect was etched near the heart area and Kai wore the cloak or rather coat around him. It looked more like a coat than a cloak, one that reached near his knees but didn't have any buttons. Let's go and have that talk, he said to a shocked Riang before disappearing. Now you might have realized, whenever Kai says he is going to have a talk, he always has something more than a talk. Author's note. I will only release 2 chapters as the weekly deal was 100 stones for 2. But don't worry, I have increased the length of the chapters to 1500 plus. Also, this will be the last bonus chapter you will receive for collections. Vote if you want more chapters. Write a review if you like it. Adios. Chapter 49. Well, can't say I didn't warn you. R.18, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 49. Well, can't say I didn't warn you. R.18, Chapter Preview. Just before he teleported, Kai snapped his fingers and the entire room was cleaned. Though, the fragrance of yin and yang qi still lingered in the air. He once again appeared in Watanabe's room, but it was empty. The sheets were wet with yin qi and its fragrance filled the room. Did she masturbate for an hour or something? Kai asked himself as he looked around the room. He used his spiritual sense to check her position and found her at the very back of the sect. The area behind the sect contained 3 hot springs, one for women, one for men, and one for people who loved to dual cultivate while being in the water. Kai felt her presence in the women's spring and he went there. Instead of bathing, Watanabe was sitting near the edge of the spring, her feet dipped in the water. She heard movement behind her and turned her head backward. Kai was standing there with a handsome smile on his face. Well, do you like this spring? He asked her as he sat beside her. Kai rolled up the sleeves of his jeans and dipped his own feet inside the spring. The hot water relaxed him completely and he laid down on the ground with his face looking up at the sky. I always liked hot springs because it refreshes your mind and body. She said after a while. Well, I guess I will make this hot spring even more worthwhile. Kai said with a mischievous grin and brought out 1,000 spirit stones from his pendant. He created a formation and powered it up with the spirit stones. The hot spring became clearer as a wave of spiritual energy rose from it. What did you do? Watanabe gasped loudly as she felt the energy inside the spring. This spring will now boost everyone's cultivation when they bathe. The only thing you have to do is feed it some spirit stones before bathing in it. He explained to her and closed his eyes. Did you masturbate for an hour? He suddenly asked and opened his eyes. He grinned at Watanabe's face as it turned red with embarrassment. How did you know that? She asked in a trembling voice. She was thinking that Kai might have been peeping at her with some treasure. But who was she to talk about this? Watanabe herself had peeped at Kai and Riang's intercourse. So, she can't blame him for doing the same with her. If you are thinking that I peeped at you, you are wrong. I could hear your moans and I just visited your room. The sheets were wet and the fragrance of yin qi lingered in the air. He said as though he had read her mind. For some reason, Watanabe believed that Kai was telling the truth. She stood up and extended a hand towards him. He took hold of it and stood up himself. He then teleported both of them away to her room. I will get straight to the point, do you want to cultivate with me? Kai asked as he looked at Watanabe with an unreadable expression. Honestly, I don't know. I want to and I don't want to at the same time. She said with a sigh, thinking that he will call her an idiot. But his reply completely startled her. You had a loved one who is dead and you are confused. So instead of choosing one of those options, we will settle in the middle. I will give you one of my famous massages. He replied. I am ready. She said in a confident voice and positioned herself on the bed, her back facing Kai. I will warn you about one thing. During the massage, your instincts will overcome you and your desire will lead you to having sex with me. Kai warned her before he started. That's not possible. She laughed as she thought Kai was joking. But her laughter died down as Kai's face was still serious. You will beg for it and well, I won't be able to say no to you. he said as he lightly touched her back. I don't think that could ever happen, but still. If I ask for anything like that, then give me. She said slowly before loosening her robes. She stood up and let them fall to the ground. She was not wearing a bra and her breasts were on clear display. The pink spots were calling Kai towards them, and it took him quite a large amount of willpower to restrain himself. His gaze then went below and looked at the pink underwear covering Watanabe's sweet spot. Pink, huh? Kai said in an amused tone and looked up at her face. Surprisingly, she laughed and looked at Kai with a seductive gaze. She held up her breasts in her hand and looked at Kai's face, trying to judge his reaction. Well, pink's my favorite color, so well, here it is. She gestured towards her underwear and settled down with a playful expression. Well, for the time we are together, pink will be my favorite color. Kai said and grinned. His hands slowly started tapping on her back as he played a particular song he liked. In the upper realms, there was a musical instrument named the piano. Kai loved to play the piano and he had written many songs for it. He started to hum the song and Watanabe was surprised at how melodious Kai's voice was. The song was a mixture of playfulness, energy, and many other things. He then started rubbing her spine from the top, where it connected with the neck, to the bottom, where it connected with the hips. Watanabe moaned in a low voice as she was afraid that someone might hear her. But she didn't need to worry about that. Kai had already created a soundproof barrier around the entire room. You can moan to your heart's content. No one can hear you as I have placed a barrier in this room. He told her, and the number of moans increased. This told him that Watanabe was suppressing her moans. Kai thought that it was time for the main show to start. He flipped over her body and touched the tip of her nipples. He then started groping her breasts as she continued to moan. He grabbed hold of every single inch of tit flesh his hand could hold and started groping at them intensively. He moved the breasts in circular motions against each other and Watanabe gasped to get air inside her body. He grabbed hold of her nipples and pinched them while rotating them in a circular motion. Watanabe's body was getting hotter with every second that passed and an unfamiliar feeling overcame her body. I think I am about to come. She said in a low voice and allowed Kai to slide down her panties. But he didn't have time to gaze at its beauty as yin chi started leaking out of it. She squirted as yin chi shot out of her hole. Kai quickly sat in a lotus pose and cultivated the yin chi as Watanabe rested for a moment. He cultivated the entire yin chi in a matter of moments. I have to say, I missed that feeling. She said with a laugh and turned around to look at Kai's face. I want to cultivate with you. Will you do it? She asked, her voice full of sincerity. My pleasure. Kai said as he dropped his clothes on the floor and stood in a heroic pose, which considering that he was naked, was a very brave thing. You will have to warm me up as my body has not experienced a dick for about a century. She said in a soft voice and sat up. She looked at Kai's hardening dick and looked below at her pussy. She had not taken good care of it and a forest of hair surrounded it. She was afraid that Kai might think that it was ugly. Instead, he just snapped his fingers and every single hair near her pussy disappeared. Is this good or do you want the hair back? He asked as he looked at her face. She just shook her head as an idea popped up in her mind. I will not give you a handjob or a blowjob. She said with certainty and looked directly into his eyes. Instead, I will please you with a tit-fucking session. She said with a playful smile and held up her breasts, kneading them perfectly. She took a firm hold of Kai's manhood with her left hand and spit on her right hand. She then slowly started fabricating Kai's rod. She stayed true to her words and didn't put it inside her mouth, but instead, she used her tongue to perfectly fabricate it in her saliva, making Kai's rod drench in it. She then grinned up at him as they both knew what was next. She pushed both of her breasts against each other before moving forward towards his rod. The tit-fucking session will now begin. Author's note. You can expect 1 or 2 more are .18 chapters. Anyways, the weekly deal is 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. 200 power stones equals 2 bonus chapters. 250 power stones equals 3 bonus chapters. Now it might look like I am being greedy, but honestly, I have increased the word length to 1500 plus words and the chapters are a lot bigger than the previous chapters. I hope you understand and vote. Chapter 50 Slap, Clap and Moan, are .18, Chapter Preview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Watanabe slowly went near Kai and used her right hand to take hold of his dick. She touched the tip to both of her nipples. Slap! She slapped his cock on her left breast and Kai was surprised by this. No wonder everyone said that she was a pervert in her early days. Slap right breast. Slap left breast. Slap slap. She alternated between her breasts and kept slapping herself. After she was satisfied with it, she lifted her breasts and engulfed Kai's rod with them. Only the head was visible and the rest of cock was swallowed by her breasts. The texture of her breasts was soft and warm and Kai felt his body relax. But that's when the real show started. She grabbed hold of her breasts and started rubbing Kai's cock with them. Up and down. Up and down. Her nipples flayed in the air and her breasts slide over Kai's cock. The saliva she used earlier was used as a boost for friction as she started doing it with much more speed. Kai enjoyed the tit job session, but now, it was his time to shine. I am going to come, he said suddenly. Watanabe licked her tongue across her lips and increased the speed even more. Kai's cock straightened as he shot load after load of hot cum. The first load hit her right in her face, washing it with cum. The second load went straight into her open mouth and she swallowed it hungrily. The last load went on her breasts and marked them with cum. Her entire upper body was sprayed with cum, but she didn't care. She licked her face clean of it and went towards Kai's still very much hard dick. She used her tongue to clean it up and sucked every drop of cum that was left. That was good, she said with a grin after she was finished. Kai returned her grin and pushed her down on the bed. The fun's just started, he said, and his face traveled down to her pussy. She opened her legs wide open so Kai could get a top class view of it. He stared at it for a second before slowly lurching forward and inserting his tongue inside it. Watanabe groaned as Kai penetrated her pussy with his slippery tongue. He went as deep as possible before his tongue started wriggling inside. As his tongue was exploring her inner walls, Kai's right hand came forward and pinched her clit. Ah, she moaned loudly as she shot chi directly into Kai's face. He gulped every single drop of it before coming back. He licked his lips with his tongue and took hold of his dick. I am going in, he said, and pushed the head inside her pussy. She moaned as she felt the head of his cock penetrate her. It had been a long time since she had a cock inside her, and honestly speaking, she had missed the feeling of it. Kai started pushing it deeper and soon, his entire cock was swallowed by her pussy. Her walls were too tight since no cock had penetrated her for years. It was almost as though she was a virgin. He moved his hips testingly and she groaned. He then perfectly shaped his dick according to her walls and an immense wave of pleasure hit her. You slapped yourself, but now, it's time for some ass slapping, Kai said with a grin and flipped their position. Watanabe was now lying on top of him and his cock was still piercing her. He moved in that position while his hand went near her ass. Slap! He slapped her right butt cheek and she moaned in pleasure. His hand was imprinted there. Normally, with pleasure came pain, however, Kai's slapping was only pleasurable and the pain vanished. Slap! This time, he slapped her left ass cheek and she moaned in pleasure as both of her sides were receiving immense pleasure. Kai was still moving his dick while being below her and his hands continued to slap her ass. Slap slap, ah, oh, clap, clap. The sounds of slapping, moaning, and clapping filled the room as Kai continued to do her doggy style while slapping her ass. This continued on for a while before Watanabe's face morphed into a more pleasured expression. Kai felt her insides heat up more than normal and realized she was about to come. He once again switched their positions so that Watanabe was lying on the bed with her back against it and Kai towered above her. He continued to thrust her, and even when she orgasmed, he didn't stop. His rod started drenching wet as yin chi continued to flow out of her. When she was finished, Kai released his yang chi inside her. She felt loads of hot yang chi pass inside her and her entire stomach was full. After this session is over, you will have a breakthrough to the third stage of the Imperial Spirit Realm. Kai suddenly declared, and Watanabe was dumbfounded because of this. But when she felt the energy present in his yang chi, she realized that what Kai was saying might be true. Both of them sat up and started cultivating. They both cultivated their respective energies for about half an hour before they opened their eyes. In the upper realms, only his harem could be considered more beautiful than her, as her split pupils gleamed with newfound energy. Did you consume a treasure to enhance your yang chi? Watanabe asked as she remembered Kai's statement about him having many treasures. Well, at least that's what she remembered after her memories were modified. Kai facepalmed at this. He didn't want anyone telling him that he just consumed a legendary treasure and became like this. What should I do? Should I let you get back your memories? No, that will be bad, as you will realize my true power. He muttered to himself. What are you talking about? Watanabe asked in confusion. Just kindly forget about it. Kai said and snapped his fingers to replace her memories. Even though it might seem like this was an overpowered ability, it still had its drawbacks. For every memory manipulated, the user had to give 0.01% of a single memory that they had. Meaning that if Kai had to trade 0.01% of a millisecond memory for every person's memory changed. But that was not a problem, as in his earlier days, Kai cultivated for decades in seclusion, and by cultivating, he meant normal cultivation. Even after that, he cultivated for many centuries, meaning that with only a millisecond of it, he could manipulate 100 people. And once someone's memories were manipulated by him, he could change them without losing any of his memories. So in reality, this move could be considered as a cheat move. But enough about that. As Watanabe's eyes came back into focus, Kai took out a bottle containing a yellow liquid inside it. What's that? Watanabe asked as she couldn't figure out what this liquid was. There are 3 types of friction. Normal friction, fast friction, and the frigging fire lighting friction. Kai said and held up there of his fingers. So? She asked, still not understanding what Kai was saying. This is a special oil that will increase the friction created during dual cultivation, and it will also increase your sensitivity. So in other words, this will increase the amount of pleasure you will feel. Kai sighed and told her about the oil in his hands. She gasped and looked at the oil with an expression of lust. Well, the lust was for Kai, not the oil. BDNVL.M, I will use it on you. He said and used some oil on her pussy. She felt a numb feeling spread throughout her body, but it was gone after a minute, replaced by a hot feeling. Her sensitivity level had broken through the meter and her insides were tingling because of it. Kai inserted his middle finger inside her pussy and she gasped loudly as though he had inserted his entire dick inside her. He removed his finger and inserted 2 fingers from his left hand. He grabbed hold of her clit using his right hand and started rotating it in a circular motion as he started finger fucking her. Ah, oh, ah. She moaned loudly and her body twitched on the bed. She felt a hot feeling pass throughout her body, and before she could do anything, she cummed. And not just a small amount, she ejaculated 4 shots of yin chi, one after the other. That was intense, and you only used your hands. What will happen if you use your cock? She asked, and her body trembled a little when she saw Kai's face turn up with an evil grin. Let's find out. He said and grabbed hold of his dick, planning to pleasure to her limit.